In light of what we learned yesterday about the errors in Article 999 of the state budget and the governor's amendatory veto, we're here to talk about the budgeting process and bringing some transparency to that process. Prior to being elected state representative, I was the Vermilion County Board Chairman for 4 years. And much like the state legislature, the most important thing that we did as a county board every year was to pass a budget. The budget was the critical issue of the year. Spending levels and departmental budgets set our goals and priorities for the county for the next year. Getting consensus and approval required a bipartisan effort and 2 separate votes to get final passage. You see, in state statute, counties are required to place their budgets on display for 30 days prior to taking a vote for passage. This is a healthy process that required the county board being fully transparent with the public. The budget was in the public for 30 days, and that allowed thorough scrutiny from other board members, county elected officials, the voting public, and the media. There was ample time for vetting the ins and outs of what was being proposed, and because the process was open, nothing could be hidden. Because the extra time allowed for both political parties to pick apart line items, the chairman had to go the extra mile at engaging members of the opposite party and win their support. The end result was usually a very good product that passed overwhelmingly, if not unanimously. With individual board members feeling like they were part of the process, they played an important role and made sure the needs of their districts were addressed. For my 3-year tenure here in Springfield, I've been calling out the ridiculous budget process that plays out every year. Every year, the process is the same. The budget is crafted behind closed doors by the governor and the legislative leaders, while appropriation committees meet mainly for show and have little or no influence on the final product. Invariably, a budget of substantial size and detail is dropped on us in the afternoon of the last day of session with little or no time to evaluate the good parts and the bad parts. When final passage is obtained, usually there are some bad and controversial items that are stuck into the budget without the knowledge of the public. This year, the final product contained major errors in Article 999 regarding effective dates, and now we are going to have to address that and fix that. This process is the complete opposite of transparency. How are we as lawmakers supposed to make a good decision on a budget when we haven't been given adequate time to evaluate that bill, much less read the entire thing? Imagine how better the process would be if both parties were allowed input on crafting a budget that truly represented the priorities of the entire state. What if there were a 30-day window for the budget to be evaluated by the public and the media before passage? Maybe it wouldn't be so easy to pass publicly unpopular items, and maybe the sloppy errors in this year's budget would have been caught. The public continues to lose faith in government, and it's because of the shady way things like the budget are handled. Sadly, these poor backroom deals and hidden practices are not limited to the budget. This year, we've seen major bills dropped last minute or in the middle of the night that will radically alter the way that we live and function in the state. The law enforcement bill was filed in the middle of the night at the end of lame duck session with little or no input from the stakeholders or a very distraught public. Many of these controversial items, just like the state budget, were given next to no time for floor debate. The bill dramatically changing law enforcement was allowed 2 voices of opposition during the debate. A little over 2 weeks ago, this year's almost $43 billion budget passed with many unanswered questions. It passed up against the deadline, and only Leader Dimmer was allowed a few brief minutes to question its provisions. This is the worst kind of process. I won't even call it a democratic process because it doesn't deserve that title. I was appalled after being in county government, seeing how business was conducted in Springfield. My shock has now turned to shame. The people of the state of Illinois deserve better than this. When I was the county board chairman, I was required to put my budget on display for 30 days. I'm currently working on legislation that will be filed shortly that will require the General Assembly to to put the proposed state budget on display for 30 days prior to passage to allow proper vetting and transparency. The bill will also allow for at least 5 speakers on both sides for and against the budget to speak during the debate. We need to start re-injecting some faith into the system. This will require transparency, and we must allow for proper debate on the most important thing we do all year long. If Speaker Welch, President Harmon, and Governor Pritzker really believe in transparency, and they really believe in a new day in the state of Illinois, they need to give these ideas a fair hearing and an up or down vote. It's time to fix the broken system that is Springfield. Now I'd like to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Representative Davidsmeyer.
Thank you, Representative Marin. I am Representative C.D. Davidsmeyer. I represent the 100th District, which is all or part of 9 counties in the central western part of the state of Illinois. We've seen just recently, obviously, we've been notified about the problems within the budget. This reiterates the need, and I've been filing a bill for about 5 or 6 years now that requires the budget to be posted online for at least 72 hours prior to any vote. When I was on the Jacksonville City Council, we always had 2 votes on our budget. We had a vote, and then 2 weeks later at our normal meeting, we'd have another vote. That allowed the general public to come in and see and view the budget. You know, when we came in and a new speaker was elected, we were told that it was a new day in Illinois. Well, the new day has the same exact processes, the same people, and you can even change the people, but if the process doesn't change, it's the same exact thing. You know, as my colleague said, the working groups work behind the scenes, and they make up random, you know, cuts to budget. They'll say, oh, let's cut 5% across the board. And they do that because they know that the speaker is not going to actually use those numbers, right? They're crafting them behind the scenes. And I will say the reason why they don't want transparency in this process is not because they're worried about the minority party supporting. They're worried about their own members coming up with reasons not to support bad budgets. We watched for at least a month and a half to 2 months that they ran people in and out, and when I say people, members of the majority party, Democrats ran in and out of their closed-door map room for a month and a half, but they did not do the same thing on the budget. They didn't have an open process. It's absolutely ridiculous that we're sitting here even discussing that. And now they're even talking about changing the way they vote because they screwed up the budget. They're talking about having remote voting because their members can't even show up to vote for the budget, which is the #1 job for the state legislature. So not being able to show up is absolutely ridiculous, and changing the rules to allow for remote voting on something this important is absolutely crazy. You know, we are better than this. We should be better than this. We owe the people of the state of Illinois much better than this. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Leader Tom Demmer.
Thanks, CD. Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Tom Demmer from Dixon. This year's state budget was filed 10 minutes to midnight and was 3,000 pages of text. What could possibly go wrong? Well, that night, we were able to identify several things that were wrong with this year's budget, including that it included legislative pay raises, including $1 billion in pork projects for Democrat-only districts, including $650 million in tax increases on Illinois businesses, including $0 to pay down a $5 billion debt in our unemployment insurance trust fund, and now including a list of articles in that bill that did not have an effective date. And now we have to come back and clean all that up. So when the bill landed on Governor Pritzker's desk, he had the opportunity through his amendatory veto to correct those problems. He could have taken out legislative pay raises. He could have taken out $1 billion in pork spending. He could have taken out $650 million in tax increases. He could have dedicated money to pay down our $5 billion debt in the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. Instead, he did nothing. He left the budget untouched, flaws and all, except for changing a few dates in a technical section of the bill. The governor had no reason not to fix the other problems in this budget, but he chose not to. He chose to ignore those problems. He chose not to pick a fight with his own party who passed a flawed budget through a flawed process at the 11th hour. We all know that's not the way that budgeting is supposed to work. It's not the way that a democracy is supposed to work. And the governor abdicated his responsibility and facilitated government working like that by simply correcting a technical error and leaving the larger problems untouched. It's inappropriate. We can't continue to operate like that, and that's why we're coming forward to call for increased transparency, increased public participation in a legitimate budget-making process that does not include these substantive errors year after year after year.